Amitakiapi, Leampe Tuwashte. Welcome to the ICT Newscast. I'm Shirley Snavy. We start in New York, where the governor has issued an historic apology for atrocities committed at a state-run boarding school. Governor Kathy Hochul traveled to the Seneca Nation to deliver the apology. Stuart Huntington has more.
The Thomas Asylum of Orphan and Destitute Indian Children was operated by the state of New York from 1875 to 1957. More than 2,500 students from across New York attended the school and were subjected to all manners of degradation.
Instead of being a haven for orphaned children, it became a place of nightmares, a place some would call a torture chamber, a site of sanctioned ethnic cleansing is what was going here. Try to eradicate the long, proud story of the Senecas and other places this occurred from Canada and elsewhere in our country. Children were forcibly removed from their families, stripped of their names, their languages, and their traditions. Sometimes they were subjected to unimaginably horrific physical, emotional, and sexual assaults. These atrocities occurred for more than 100 years. They were known by the state of New York, 75 years of which it was owned by the state. And what has happened has been a long legacy of broken promises throughout the 19th and 20th centuries that continue today to affect the families, sometimes resulting in this generational trauma that I heard so clearly is so prevalent.
The Thomas Indian School was originally established by Presbyterian missionaries in 1855 and taken over by the state 2 decades later. It was among more than 400 government-supported schools established throughout the country to assimilate Native American youths. Last year, President Biden issued a nationwide apology.
I formally apologize as President of the United States of America for what we did. I formally apologize.
Now New York's governor has added her voice to the healing effort.
I, Governor Kathy Hochul, apologize to the Seneca Nation of Indians and survivors and descendants from all nations who attended the Thomas Indian School. And I recognize, on behalf of the people of this state, the atrocities that were committed there and the enduring trauma that's been inflicted upon the Seneca and all indigenous peoples across our state. And that is why I recommit to the truth, the justice, the reconciliation, accountability, and healing that must begin today and forward into the future. With that, I'll present a proclamation to President Seneca.
Seneca President J. Conrad Seneca, whose father attended the school, thanked the governor for her apology.
Thank you, Governor. We really appreciate that, and your apology and your words today mean a great deal to us, and we look forward to continued building our relationship together.
But he also reminded everyone why they were there.
Today is about the children and the families that they had to endure the hardships and mistreatment that occurred here on this piece of land at this campus of the Thomas Indian School. And so, as we gather today, let's remember them.
The governor vowed that her apology would not be a hollow gesture and that her budget blueprint will propose new education materials about local indigenous communities, calling it a first step. President Seneca told ICT he was prepared to be optimistic.
Yeah, I've been on a process of engagement and advocacy since I started my presidency, and we've gained some good ground in regards to relationships in the legislature in Albany and also with the governor's office. And so we want to continue that. We want to build on that. And the governor has committed to me in regards to working on that together to have a better relationship as we move down the road.
For ICT, I'm Stuart Huntington.
For more on the boarding school apology, I'd like to bring in national correspondent Marionette Pember. She's covered the boarding school era stories for decades. Welcome, Marionette.
Hi, Shirley. Good to be here.
Marionette, what makes this apology different?
Well, it was very strongly worded. Governor Hochul described the treatment that children received at boarding schools as ethnic cleansing. And I don't think we've seen any Buddy in leadership, from the Pope to the Premier in Canada to any of the to the apology here in the United States, or any of the states, offer such a strongly worded apology.
And where do we go to from here?
I think one of the notable things about any of the apologies that there are no deliverables directly tied to them. And I think that's an important step that people really want to see. They want to see, deliverables in terms of recording the history, making it available to people and teaching it in schools potentially, and then offering, mental health supports for survivors and their descendants.
We'll see where this story goes. Thanks for joining me, Marionette Pember, ICT National Correspondent.
Thanks for having me, Shirley.
Now to Arizona, where a federal judge temporarily halted plans for a copper mine on lands the tribes hold sacred. Apache leaders hailed the development.
The momentum is really like a spiritual feeling. Something is happening.
Wensler Noisy Sr. has been fighting for years to stop the transfer of Tonto National Forest land, known as Oak Flat, to Resolution Copper. His group, Apache Stronghold, sued in 2021 to protect the place tribal members deemed sacred. The new ruling puts the project on hold until the U.S. Supreme Court hears an appeal of a decision that refused to block the mine. Noisy credited the old ways for the development.
I got to go back to my mother when she told me, we're Apaches and I'm a descendant from the Cherokees, and pretty much everybody knows the story of the Cherokees. So I'm the same band as Geronimo Badunkahe. That's the same people I come from, and so I'm really grateful to my mother, because there's so many times I could have gone like different ways, but it was important that I kept in prayer. It's important that I exercise what was old, the old religion, because so many times, we get away from the focus of who we are. Because in the meantime, if we can stay back to who we are, then we find incredible things happening, just like what we see right now, what's happening in Oak Flats and within our case.
Resolution Copper says the mining project has strong local and national support. It expects the Supreme Court to decide soon on hearing the case.
Aaravay tuat Tavay, which is Ute for today is a good day. Aaravay is today, tuat is good, and Tavay is day. Aaravay tuat Tavay, which is Ute for today is a good day.
Memorial Day is a time to thank and remember our relatives who served in the armed services. I talked with two brothers who are also, brothers in arms. Let's take a look as they talk about their service. Today we have Jake and Mike Stop with us to talk about Memorial Day and what it means to be a veteran. Now, both of you gentlemen served. Jake, would you like to tell me about your service?
I joined in 2004 and got out in 2013, just under 9 years. I did 2 tours in Iraq, 12-month tour, 112, 113. Yeah, I was in the infantry. I've moved around quite a bit. I enlisted. I was living in New York City at the time. I actually enlisted in Times Square, and then got sent to Fort Benning, Georgia for basic training in AIT. From there, I went to Fort Hood in Texas and deployed to Iraq within the first year of my enlistment. Did another deployment there. Went to Master Gunner School for Bradleys. So I was a Bradley instructor, Master Gunner.
My career is not as extensive as Jake's. I was only in for about 6 years. I enlisted in 1998 and spent a couple years as an enlisted soldier in the infantry, and then went to West Point as a cadet. Unfortunately, I was hurt and was unable to be commissioned when I left West Point. So that was the end of my service. Still stayed close in it, worked as a civilian in the Department of Defense after that. But again, my service is not nearly as extensive as my brother's. So that's why I was glad he was able to join us today.
So, Jake, how do you think serving in the military changed your life or impacted your life?
I believe that my time in the service is basically the core of everything that I do now and everything that I've become. It has an effect in every decision that I make and every life choice and all my relations. It's played a substantial role in the man I am today.
There's this long history of Native Americans serving, but maybe we don't know all of the famous Native Americans, other than you and Jake, that have impacted our country's service.
Native Americans have served in the U.S. military since the founding of this country. Tribes have taken different sides in every one of the local, or what I would call domestic, conflicts, both the Revolution and the Civil War. There were tribes on both sides of those arguments. But one of the things that I discovered when I went to West Point was that one of the earliest non-European graduates was actually a Creek Indian from Alabama named David Moniak. He was in one of the earliest classes, the class of 1822, and went on to become a major and actually died in the Second Seminole War in action. And then we think about some other famous folks like Aaravay, who was part of the Iwo Jima flag raising. We don't always associate that, but there were Native Americans a part of almost every major engagement in the United States and played significant roles. I think we're all aware, of course, of the Code Talkers, specifically the Navajo Code Talkers in World War II, but we also had Comanche Code Talkers in World War I, which played a significant role as well.
So how will you two spend Memorial Day?
I think it's important to celebrate Memorial Day. I'll say that you see a lot of folks who say, remember what this holiday's about and make a big deal. It's not about barbecues and lake time, but it is. I've had a number of friends and classmates who've died in service to the country. I do think about them over Memorial Day. I don't think it needs to be a time to be down and depressed, because that's not who they were. And that I know that's not necessarily what they would think. Had a really good friend of mine, David Frazier, who I think about every year. He was a roommate of mine. And I'll tell a funny story about him in just a minute. But we do need to remember those who have, given the ultimate price. But at the same time, it's to celebrate life. It's to celebrate the freedoms that we have because of what our military does. But David Frazier and I were roommates, and he had never met a real Indian until we met. And so he was a runner from Houston, just got out of high school, and I was a little older, had been enlisted, and so I was bringing him up and teaching him things as we went, stuff that I had learned as an enlisted soldier. So he was always asking me questions and bugging me for a while. But then one night we were laying in our racks and the lights are off, and he whispers out into the dark. He says, "Mike, can I ask you a question?" I said, "Yeah, what's going on? You've been asking me questions all day." He goes, "Well, I don't know how you'll react to this one." I said, "Just ask me the question, Dave." He said, "Did you grow up in a teepee?" At first I got upset and I thought, I'm going to mess with him. I said, "Yeah, Dave, I grew up in a teepee. The biggest problem was the cable guy didn't know what corner to put the cable in because there were no corners." So while we have a high percentage of Native Americans who serve per capita, we're still a very small percentage of the population at large, and people don't really know who the modern American Indian is. So it's one of the things we get to do in the military is actually share those stories with those we serve with.
One of my roles was to train the Iraqi army, and it was crazy. We would live in the barracks with them. We would eat with them. We would sleep in the same room with them. We would go on raids with them. And in the evening, we would hang out, and they would watch old Westerns, and they would see the Indians circling the wagons and going crazy. And one of the guys, one of my buddies, pointed at me, and he's like, he's an Indian. And their eyes just got this big. They didn't think that was real. They were like, and they were just shocked that Indians were real and that we were still alive. And then I got a lot more respect off of them after they realized that, because we actually do, our cultures do have a lot in common, especially when it comes to families and food, and gatherings, and celebrations and mourning is a lot similar. The Iraqis in some of the traditional Native American ways.
Well, gentlemen, I appreciate you taking time out to talk to me about Memorial Day. Thank you very much. And thank you for your service.
Thanks, Shirley.
Thanks for having me.
Water is life, Mni Wiconi. It's a term that resonates deeply in Indian country, including with activists from Ponca tribes who gathered May 17th on the Niobrara River to learn from each other. The rain blessed the old Ponca agency grounds the day before the convening of the Four Winds. 200 people registered for the gathering, which was led by leaders from the southern and northern bands of Ponca.
This is the first one held outside of Oklahoma. When we had sat together and decided what was a way to do some outreach in the plains area, we had thought we would go to the four quadrants of Oklahoma. So we started in the north, we moved to the east, we had the south this last fall, and then we just decided we were just going to jump out a little bit, and we reached out to our relatives up here with the Ponca tribe of Nebraska, and they were gracious enough to offer to co-host with us.
Some of our members of the Ponca Language and Culture Committee have attended this annual event down south. And so we went to them and asked for assistance. And so they were able to stay in communication with Casey and her daughter Julie. And we just, several months of planning, Zoom calls because of the distance between the southern Ponca and the northern Ponca. But it's been a great partnership, and we're so happy to host.
It's an interesting guidance, this gathering is. This is the fourth of the Four Winds convening for the movement rights. And we're here to discuss what's already a reality, the rights of nature. Rights of nature within the Ponca territory has a certain understanding, but for us to be able to have this particular gathering in our homeland is just like a dream come true, and it's like Mother Earth is answering our deepest prayers.
Due to a real estate mistake in the Treaty of 1868, Ponca lands were ceded to the Dakota. By 1877, the Ponca were forced out to Indian Territory, Oklahoma.
My grandma always talked to us about our blood memory. And it's that what we carry in our DNA or in our bones, that is that connection we have, and ours is up here, so we're now caretakers of a small piece of that place down in Oklahoma. That there's 39 tribes that only 2 are indigenous to, and the tribes are as diverse as the topography is there. There's all of the different terrain and everything that goes on there, and we all have our own ways, and all of us still, after all these generations, long to come home. So getting to be, up here and seeing what our relatives are doing up here, what they're bringing back, all of the culture and all of the things that they had to sign away in order to stay here. You don't know which one of us got the worst trade, right?
I came for to learn about the fight that people are doing against these pipelines and stuff, and about for the preservation of water and everything. So I have kids, so I want them to be able to have a good life ahead of them, their kids and all the future generations.
Lighting of the fires started the day, followed by a water ceremony and corn planting.
It's just all new to me, so I'm learning. I ask questions if I don't know, and the sacred fire and then the water, it's all new, so it's interesting too. I'm glad I came.
Sometimes planting corn can be very intimate, and it has a way of being grounded, and you can heal. I was raped, and it hurt me very badly, and I found that I could go and speak to the plants. I could play in the dirt, pray in the dirt, and that it was healing. And I want people to know that Mother Earth has a way of doing that for us. And if we take care of her, she will take care of us.
I think that it's really important to always reiterate the same thing that we have to understand is that the natural laws are inherent and they're in action. The natural laws are part of indigenous cosmology as well. And so rights of nature and these types of gatherings allow us to bring all of those things into a package that we can translate from our indigenous places of knowledge into Western law and literally be able to enforce them and recognize that we humans are not separate from nature, we are nature.
For ICT from the homelands of the Ponca, I'm Shirley Snavy. Storytelling comes in many forms. Meet Morgan Thompson, who brings her Cherokee culture to animation.
Morgan Thompson, thanks so much for joining the ICT Newscast. Let's get right into it. Can you talk to me about what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I am a Cherokee artist. I basically work in animation as a storyboard artist, and I also do a little bit of producing. And then I'm also a writer over at Scholastic, and I do basically a little bit of this and that. I'd like to thank you guys for having me on, by the way.
Morgan, like you just said, you are Cherokee. How does that influence your work?
Oh, like in every way. Like whenever you're telling a story, you always give like a part of yourself to people. And growing up on the Cherokee Reservation in northeastern Oklahoma, like every part that I give of myself to you is a little bit of like my culture, like the people I grew up with, the community I've like loved like with all my heart for like ever. Because like that's who I've been with my whole life, right?
And why did you decide to become an animator?
I think I really wanted to like become an animator because I liked the idea of being able to tell stories with pictures. And over the years, my like definition of that has changed quite a bit. I've spread out to other things, but my heart has always come back to animation just because it was kind of my first love as a kid. Whenever like we would go over to a grandparents' house or I'd be hanging out with my cousins, we were always watching something animated. So that was kind of the closest media I had growing up as a kid, and I think it just stuck with me.
You know, being working in the entertainment industry and the animation industry, how was it like being native?
Oh, it's like I would say it's a hoot, but I mean like there are some like pros and cons to being native in this industry. But what I love the most about it is like being able to share like a bit of myself with like the animation community and show them just like what we are as native people, like how I grew up, like kind of like breaking those stereotypes that they have envisioned in their minds and show them that like yeah, we're not all like living in teepees or anything like that. We're kind of like just regular people that like to have fun, you know? We like a good laugh.
You actually worked on a new movie called Pow by Joey Clift recently. What was it like working on that movie?
Oh, it was like everything I could want in an animation production and more. I got to like be able to do like a lot of like native inspired designs that we don't really get to see very much in animation because of just like how the industry is right now. There isn't a lot of call for stuff like that, which fingers crossed there's more in the future. But working with Joey, I like finally got to like draw like native dancers and try and help them figure out how that would look in animated like form and like figuring out the layouts and what those look like compared to like an outdoor powwow and stuff like that, and taking an inspiration from other animated films to like try and envision like what a native like short film would look like, basically.
There will be Native children watching this interview. For those Native children that are interested in animation, what advice do you have for them?
My biggest advice for like Native kids that want to get into this industry is to like just be yourself and just like tell stories and just keep drawing. Like that is the like quintessential thing about animation is like it doesn't matter like where you're from or what you look like as long as you're your authentic self, people will listen and people do respond very well to that. And I think like it's been like so long since we've really had like a native voice in this industry that I think people are like looking for that now. So I'd say just go for it. If you are interested in an industry like this, like there's no right way to do it.
We were just talking about how, your background influences your work. Can you talk to me about some of your other influences?
Yeah, so as an artist, I have like a ton, but one of the more prominent ones has always been Lloyd Kiva New. He's a Cherokee fashion designer, and I just like he might be a fashion designer, but I fell in love with his watercolor work. I think it's like absolutely incredible. And as somebody who's still a sucker for watercolor work, like I always come back to like his paintings and like find new inspiration from that. I'm also inspired by a lot of people in animation, like Chris Sanders, and Brenda Chapman is another one.
Morgan, can you talk to me about any projects you're currently working on?
So as of right now, I'm actually writing a YA rom-com for Scholastic. It's called How to Be a Heartbreaker, and it is like my debut novel. So it's been like a very like interesting ride being with them on this project, and I'm like excited to be able to show everybody like what I've been working on.
Morgan Thompson, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.